What's up, everyone? We're back for another episode of Locked On Bucks, and we're going to wrap up what was some swift work from John Horst on this free agency. This man has got a vacation to get to, I think, because he got his deals done quickly and efficiently. And as we suggested for the Bucks, if they were going to have a successful free agency period, it probably meant a lot of guys were coming back, headlined by Bobby Portis. So we're going to break it all down. Frank's here; he's still at work. I think he's been crunching the financial numbers. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and find my work over at ESPN alongside me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Mann. And of course, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day. And we are recording a little bit earlier today because, as we said, the Bucks really got their business done. But Frank, I'm going to throw it straight to you, but I'm just going to quickly run through it. Bobby Portis, 4 years, 49, I believe was the final figure there, or the reported figure. That was basically the max the Bucks could offer him. We suspected yesterday when I was on the podcast with Camille that was going to happen. So not a great surprise, but still nice to lock that one up. Jevon Carter's coming back. Wesley Matthews is coming back. And then the greatest free agency signing in the history of the Milwaukee Bucks, Joe Ingles, is coming. Nick Monroe, if you're listening, get the Australia flag back up in the practice facility pronto. I think he's in Greece right now. Get back on the plane and get the flag up. Joe Ingles signed with the Bucks as well. And, all jokes aside, they did use the taxpayer MLE that we wondered whether they were going to use at all, and they used it on a guy that is still recovering from a torn ACL. So I guess we can't say the owners are cheap, Frank. I guess that's one takeaway from today because it was an expensive day.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, they pretty much knocked out. I mean, they could pretty much do nothing the rest of the summer and have pretty much a fully formed roster ready for training camp. They've got some decisions they'll have to make around the non-guaranteed deals of Luka Vildoza and Rajon Tucker, but whatever, worry about those down the road. But, essentially they have 13 guaranteed contracts at this point. And, the bringing the band back together, right? I think, for most of us, seeing Bobby Portis back, seeing Wes Matthews back, my personal favorite, and seeing Jevon Carter come back, again, like I think most of us were hoping that would be the case, that those three guys would come back. Obviously, Bobby, what he did the last couple of years in the regular season in particular, but then being obviously a guy that had some huge moments helping lead the Bucks to an NBA championship, and then obviously last year doing it again, taking the discount to stay with the Bucks. And I think there was always that assumption that there was an understanding that he was going to come back on the cheap last year with some sort of promise that he was going to get a very big offer this summer. And the most they could offer him was 105% of the mid-level, which is just shy of $11 million a year as a starting salary, tack on max raises, and you get to that almost $49 million that you mentioned. I think we heard there's a player option on it as well. So the John Horst special, I think Jevon Carter got a player option. Everybody gets a player option. That's just kind of how we do it. But look, I mean, that is not a cheap number for Bobby Portis. 4 years with the player option. You have to hope that he's going to not suffer a drop off, that he's going to continue to play at the high level that he has the last 2 years. He's only 27 years old. He'll turn 28 next February. So I think the good news is, you're not paying a guy in his, mid 30s that number, right? Not everybody ages like PJ Tucker. Maybe we'll talk about him another day, signing for 33 million guaranteed at the age of 37 with Philly. But yeah, I mean, I think, there's sort of I would say that there's kind of the basketball side of it. If I kind of take my, Bucks fan hat off, I put aside kind of what I've seen Bobby do, I'd say, hey, look, this feels like a pretty damn big contract for Bobby. He's a guy obviously had some struggles in the second round of the playoffs this year. Obviously the net series the previous year had issues, didn't really play much before bouncing back and playing a pretty big role in the next two series. Again, I mean, I wanted Bobby back if it meant having to go the full freight, 49 million, the most the Bucks could offer. Hey, I'm okay with that. But by the same token, is he a trade asset at 49 million? I don't know. I mean, there's probably some teams that might be interested in him at that number, but obviously you just hope that he continues to play well and plays a big role for this team, and that you don't have to think about trades. But look, that's kind of the nature of unrestricted free agency as well. You have to pay guys to keep them, and with Bobby, obviously unique circumstances. We can argue about paying for past performance, blah blah blah, but this was the right thing to do, I think. In the grand scheme of the basketball universe, the basketball gods, I think are smiling that Bobby Portis was rewarded for what he did the last 2 years and the sacrifices he made financially to be a part of this team. Not just last year, but I mean the first year that he was here as well. He took certainly less money than he could have elsewhere to come to Milwaukee, and made a commitment to try to be a winner. And obviously that first year, coming home with the championship, he's back. Pat Connaughton's back. I enjoyed seeing Pat tweeting something out about them being back together, and it's just imagining that image of the two of them in the post championship interview where they're sitting next to each other. I forget, somebody asked them a question, right, and they just turn to each other holding champagne bottles and just start laughing.
I think it was like, how much champagne have you drunk or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and again, I think we know how Bobby and Brooke and Giannis fit as a front court trio, right? As kind of the big trio. I think as long as those guys stay healthy, you feel good about what they can do. And I think we'll talk here in a minute about one of the other additions to the Bucks front court and how maybe he complements what they have, at least down the road, Joe Ingles. But yeah, I think a day that I think you have to feel good about. And Bobby Portis, nothing but good vibes for the last couple of years, and hopefully in 4 more years to come.
Yeah, when I mentioned at the start, because I should clarify, when I say that you can't call the owners cheap, we've always said that, and you've been the one that's actually said it more than anyone. It's not, we don't have to care about it. But we did just watch the Golden State Warriors win a title, and so much was made about the money they spent. But ultimately, as you said, even if there are some people out there that think, well, gee, that is a big contract for Bobby Portis, you factor in the fact that he took significant discounts last year, or a significant discount last year, you put it all together. And ultimately, the fact that if you didn't bring him back, you weren't going to get close to a replacement player for what he's actually brought during the regular season, started 60 games, whatever he did last year. So, I mean, it was a move that if they wanted to continue to contend year on year, it's going to be really bloody expensive. And Bobby Portis coming back, a guy that obviously loves it here, is nice. And I think we spoke about it with Camille yesterday, but when you got down to the point where he was essentially going to be getting that full MLE salary anyway, and there was only salary cap teams, it was like, is Bobby Portis really going to take an extra couple mil a year to play for the Detroit Pistons or something like that? You felt like he was coming back. You mentioned Wes. You love Wes. I'm happy for Jevon Carter, Frank. And we spoke about him a lot during the playoffs, and there was a big push that he should have been playing. I'm excited to see what else he can do, because he is one of the other guys, one of the rare other guys that's a little bit younger on the roster. He's bounced around a little bit. He seemed like, basically like everyone that comes to this team, seemed like he was happy to be here, but he did have some nice moments. And there's a lot of talk about George Hill out there. And last year in the postseason, probably there was a strong contingent of people that wanted Carter on the floor instead of George Hill. But let's see now. He gets a real opportunity to, as of right now, the backup point guard spot is still well and truly up for grabs.
Yeah, I mean, Jevon's not even 27 yet. He looks like he's like 43. So, he's got that veteran look, but just not even 27 years old. So again, kind of like Bobby, again, obviously with this team, Wes being on the very other side, very, very much other side of 30. We know when you're trying to win championships, you're going to have some older guys in the roster. That's only natural, right? We've seen, obviously there's good reasons for that, but obviously good to keep some of these guys around who are still, young enough that they may still have some more that they might tap into. I don't know that we're going to see, Bobby Portis' further upside necessarily. Maybe there's some additional growth he can bring defensively to his game. But, I think we've seen kind of what Bobby is, and you're paying him to just continue to be that. With Jevon, the 3-point shooting numbers after he came over from Brooklyn, I think we need to, maybe tamp down expectations a little bit, right? Like,
that's the bar.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But again, he's a career 38% 3-point shooter, right? I mean, it's not like it was a complete fluke to be a solid for 3-point shooter, but 56% from 3-point range in 20 games with the Bucks. Maybe not going to be quite that guy night in and night out, but again, you just want to have solid guys. We always hear, every team talks about next man up when there's injuries. The Bucks do that. Every team does that. But having guys like him, who I think, again, you tap them on the shoulder to get in there, they're going to give you, an honest night's work defensively. They're going to play their role offensively. And you can kind of just count on them to make the right plays. And I thought, again, looking back, I mean, that first round series, he had to play obviously a lot more than expected after Chris Middleton went down and with George Hill hurt for that first series against the Bulls. And, we talk a lot about his lack of size, but I was impressed how he competed and defended Zach LaVine. And Zach's not as physical as Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, so I don't know that he would have had the same success guarding those guys given this huge size differential. But I think he's definitely a guy that can defend up a little bit defensively, and again, just kind of fits the the Bucks profile, and I think fits in with kind of the type of character guys that the Bucks like. And I think we were all curious if he was going to come back, and I think I'm happy that he is. And obviously probably the big question for the remainder of the summer now with most of the roster set is, is there going to be a potential trade, right? George Hill and Grayson Allen are kind of the two guys you'd look at as the obvious potential chips if the Bucks wanted to make some kind of move. So we'll see. I mean, I think you definitely feel a little bit more comfortable potentially making a move with a George Hill, knowing that you've got Jevon as a backup that you trust to, again, maybe not be really dynamic, but at least be a guy that isn't going to, make mistakes, isn't going to, beat himself, and can hit an open shot when needed. So yeah, happy for Jevon to come back, and you get him for 2 years. And Wes, I mean, again, just remarkable for Wes to come back the way he did. I mean, crazy that he wasn't signed, coming into the season by anybody, and for him to, basically try to get a job with the Bucks, and the Bucks give him that chance late November, early December, and kind of immediately steps into a role, and it was hitting shots, and has that huge night on Christmas, being part of that comeback. It's essentially the game-winning shot against the Celtics on Christmas Day, a game that I thought they were going to lose. And just throughout the season, just continue to provide just that really tough, defensive, hardworking mindset, and made enough shots to kind of keep defenses at least a little bit honest. Again, you can't really ask for much more. And I think both with Wes and Jevon, you would love to not have to rely on them to play big minutes, right? Like with Wes, I don't think you want to have to play him 35 minutes a night, 30 minutes a night like they were against the Celtics. But if they get into a spot where he's coming off the bench playing 20 minutes a night because you feel better about some of the other guys in the rotation, and Chris Middleton and everybody else is healthy, I think that's a spot that you'd love to kind of continue to be able to play Wes. And again, a lot of it obviously is just going to come down to him being able to not drop off much and continue to do what we saw last year, and again, stay physically healthy. I think again, a regular season in particular, you don't want to rely on him too much, just because you want to keep him fresh, so that if you do need him to kind of ramp up a bit in the playoffs, that he'll be ready to do that. So yeah, just excited for Wes. And again, I mean, winning the championship was incredible. Being able to do it again and have Wes, and I know most people aren't as nostalgic about George Hill, but to be able to win a championship and bring some of these guys along for the ride that were part of kind of some of the previous teams, that would be a lot of fun. And I think Robin Lopez has Robin Lopez been signed yet? Maybe bring Rolo back, get the pregame wrestling matches going again. But we'll see. But yeah, I think we thought both these guys would be back, and great to see them get it done on day one, and not leave it to chance.
Yeah, it's 7:30 p.m. Central Time right now. So this is an early podcast for us. It's still daylight, as people can see as they're watching on YouTube where you are. So there are still notifications coming through. So I'm keeping an eye on it. And it's interesting because a couple of guys that we loosely referenced as potential targets, Gary Harris has just re-signed with the Magic on a 2-year, $26 million deal. So that probably wasn't in the Bucks range. Javel Mcgee was someone that loosely had been mentioned. The Bucks, as you point, I know you sort of mentioned Robin Lopez, but maybe they do want a backup center. I don't know whether that's something they're trying to do, but Javel Mcgee ends up signing 3 years, I think 25 million or something with the Mavericks.
20 million with a player option.
Yeah,
34 years old.
Just crazy stuff.
I would have been happy to get JaVale for the minimum, and then it's like, and then you see the reporting, I think, coming out of like Arizona about, you know, the Mavericks and Bucks are interested in him. It's just like, Bucks, like, how much do you want to pay him to be like a guy that maybe doesn't play at all in the postseason? That was my kind of thing. We can obviously talk about that, but to me, that's the one spot you still want to look at as you know, bring another big man in so you don't have to do the same dance you did last year if Brooke gets hurt. But yeah, let's just say I mean, should we start talking about Joe Ingles, the guy they did spend the mid-level on? Because you know, it's a really interesting signing.
Let me come back to it. Because we
got to pay the bills.
We got to pay the bills. And speaking of all this money that's been spent today, talking about minimum deals, Arcade 1UP. This is virtually a minimum deal for an excellent arcade game. Everyone loves NBA Jam. We know that, and it's back. They got the Shaq edition, and we are giving away 3 of these. I believe is the latest message that I've heard. People are obsessed with NBA Jam, and I'm thrilled to tell our listeners that you can once again play hoops with NBA legends in this arcade classic. No quarters required, no free throws, no fouls. It's real and digitized NBA license. One of the first games that had that actually back in the day, which, you know, is still cool to this day. Everyone still loves NBA Jam. And we're giving away an NBA Jam Shaq edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win the game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade, the number 1, up.com/lockedon. You've got until July 8th to enter, so about a week from now. Just go to arcade1up.com/lockedon, and I believe it just pops up straight on the screen. So it literally couldn't be easier to enter this competition. Don't miss out. Enter today. Joe Ingles, Frank. Everyone's been waiting. This is why everyone's tuned in today. And it's interesting because I'm working the Australian national team. They're playing World Cup qualifiers right now. I'm working, by the way, sideline. First time ever working the sidelines. So I ended up taking I made a mental health decision this morning not to set an alarm for free agency because I was just exhausted last night because I was stressed out about this situation. Anyway, we did it. There was no major mistakes. It's great stuff. But Joe Ingles is there. Joe Ingles is sitting there courtside. And I'm like, come on, Joe. Just like, I don't know, make a deer horn sign to me or something. Give me something last night, but he didn't do it. But hopefully I'll catch up with him tonight. Australia's playing again tonight. So we'll see if he'll give me any time. But I didn't really consider this when we had the discussions about the taxpayer MLE. Would the Bucks spend it? Would they want to, you know, it's around 30 mil. You've probably got the exact number in terms of overall spendings with the tax and all those types of things. So I didn't really consider Joe because I was like, well, would they spend that money on a guy that is probably conservatively looking at a return in the new year as he recovers from an ACL? But there's no doubt the Bucks have looked at this and said, okay, we believe that there's some upside here with this signing. We don't really feel like with the roster that we've got that we need to rush him. And I think it's also probably for Joe, he's probably talked to the Bucks and they've said, hey, we've got Suki Hobson here, ACL expert. And
practically Australian. She's an adoptive Australian, you know.
Well, Troy Flanagan as well is there, Australian with the staff there. So there's plenty of Australians in the thing. I'm not saying that's why he signed, but I think that they would have been able to paint a pretty good picture for the history of this medical staff with getting guys healthy. And I think they're taking the long approach, and they believe that this guy he's got plenty of playoff experience and someone that they think they can play in the postseason. But it was definitely a surprise to me, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, you never really know kind of how teams are going to evaluate a guy. He tore his ACL on January 30th, you know, so obviously guys can come back in less than a year from an ACL. Typically, I mean, I always sort of just bookmark roughly a year to return. Some guys don't, right? Kane, I mean, you've torn your, how many times have you torn your ACL and other stuff in your knee? What are we at? What number are we at now?
3 torn ACLs, and I did return twice actually, and it didn't last long. But I would recommend the conservative approach, Joe.
So, so like, what is that worth, right? I mean, I'm sure some teams look at that and say, well, hey, if you're sitting around unsigned, in midseason, wouldn't Joe Ingles be a great pickup if he comes back healthy, right? Other teams, like the Bucks, obviously took the most aggressive approach and said, we're willing to just give him the money now, rehab him with the club. Obviously the Bucks and their staff have a great reputation, and unfortunately, I mean, Suki had experience in ACL rehab before the Jabari Parker situation. I think that might have been part of the appeal of her coming in the first place, but obviously you feel good about getting him in here and doing his rehab under this training staff, and just being part of the team, right? I mean, obviously, it's just a different experience coming in training camp and being a part of a team, even if you're not playing, versus just waiting and having to do this, on the side in Australia or Utah or wherever you would have been doing it, and then having to show up, signing somewhere mid-season. So, hopefully that stability helps once he is ready to return. And I mean, it's a dice roll, right? Like you're gambling that he can come back and be close to, maybe not the guy that he was pre-injury, but at least close to it. And there's absolutely a risk in that, right? I mean, I don't know. Is it a 50-50 shot that he comes back and is, close to what he was previously? Yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I'm not saying that's a scientific way to think about it. But you look at the player that he was in Utah. I mean, he was just a really, really valuable player who was able to do just a bit of everything. I mean, he's kind of big, right? He's 6'8". He's a big guy. Defended multiple positions, right? I mean, again, he looks like a guy in your bowling league, but does he defends multiple positions, defends really good players. Again, probably more of a team defender than just like any sort of like lockdown guy, especially coming off of an ACL. But just super smart player, great pick and roll player. The pick and roll game that he brought off the bench was such a key piece of those Utah teams when they were actually good. And I mean, is it a coincidence that Joe Ingles tears his ACL and then the wheels kind of come off of the Utah Jazz? I think there's probably a very tight correlation between those two things happening. And his 3-point shot wasn't as good last year. I mean, he was a guy that was up 45% a couple years, led the league, I think, at least once. So he's, a really good 3-point shooter. Fell off a little bit last year before the injury. But as far as, again, for a team like the Bucks, it obviously values having a spot up shooter. He's really good at that. Justin Garcia pointed out on Twitter and about like Pat Connaughton, he is an artist at the catch high, keep it high 3-point shot, which I still hypothesize he played with Korver in 18-19. I don't know if he got it from Korver because Korver apparently kind of taught Pat Connaughton to do it a couple years ago. You'll have to ask that question to Joe whether that was something that Kyle Korver taught him well. But just a really smart player, and you just look at like his shooting splits from different parts of the court. Again, just a really smart player, really efficient shooter. Never going to be like a high volume creator per se, but again, just the passing out of the pick and roll, I think gives him a unique dimension that you just, probably a lot of people who, haven't really watched him closely probably don't appreciate. So again, just the basketball IQ, the shooting skill, and, the defensive intelligence. Again, you're gambling that those things, even if he's not maybe athletically where he was prior to the injury, when he comes back, he's just so smart that he's going to be able to figure it out, right? And
not a lot to lose.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's sort of things as we were saying. I wasn't sure that they were going to use the mid level, and looking at a lot of the guys that I had on my list of like, hey, maybe can you offer them the mid level and hope that they maybe take it, right? Well, Gary Harris is getting 13 million a year. Batum's getting 11 million a year. Oladipo took 11 million for 1 year. Patty Mills took 7 million over 2 years. So maybe that would have been a little more competitive to try to get. And Thad Young took 16 million, right? All these guys, like, I mean, you couldn't have matched those dollars, right? So, Daniel House, 2 years, $8 million. That was the only one that was, so far of the guys that I had on my list that actually is signed for less than the taxpayer mid-level. So, again, in the grand scheme of the universe, I'm sure we'll see some guys sign for less that you might look at and say, that guy would have been an interesting signing. But I think the interesting thing is, and I'm curious to see what your take is, given obviously you've watched Joe more than I have, is in the playoffs, what kind of lineup possibilities does he unlock? And, again, let's say he's 85 to 90% of what he was. Again, I think he's a guy that you hope will be a playable guy defensively, and then a really smart guy offensively who fits in with the big three. I'm trying to figure out, can he be, again, he's not like a PJ Tucker type defensively per se. He's not that exact same type of player, but much more skilled offensively. Is there a Giannis, Chris, Drew, and then Joe Ingles plus, take your pick, Pat Connaughton or whoever lineup there that could be really interesting. Like, I don't know. That's the kind of piece I'm trying to figure out. But again, he's a guy that's very experienced at coming off the bench, and again, being kind of the engine of second units with his pick and roll game and just his basketball IQ. So and he's just, you actually have spoken to him, so you actually know him. You can speak to what he's like as a person, but just shit talker, trash talker, which is always funny, right? Because just look at him, right? Like, undrafted guy, had to fight and scratch for everything in this league. He's just a great story. And again, I think he's just, from a locker room perspective, and just maybe give the Bucks a little bit of edge. He's just I think a guy that just fits in really well with the character of this team. So I don't know. I mean, tell me what you think about kind of how his game, like in terms of lineups, anything kind of jump out to you in terms of his game, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about his personality too, because I'm just looking forward to kind of what he'll be like with the rest of this team.
Yeah, well, the first thing that I thought was interesting to me when I looked at the Bet Online odds was the Bucks are easily NBA championship favorites now that they've got Joe Ingles. I just want to say that was a lie, but you can jump on betonline.net, which is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. And I do have the odds, and this was prior to yesterday. The Bucks are 6-1 to win the title, fourth favorite. Interesting though, the Brooklyn Nets were 7-1. I feel like they. I don't know if that's the bet I would be going for right now. The Brooklyn Nets. Out of all the tweets I woke up to, Joe Ingles was maybe number one surprise, but Kevin Durant asking for a trade. Oh, what a way to start the day. So anyway, go to betonline.net. There's NFL futures, baseball stuff, everything you need on there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. I was interested. I said this to you that I think there was a healthy mixture. Well, first of all, I got tagged in about 350,000 tweets this morning. Like, well, looks like Kane's going back to Milwaukee. By the way, yeah, I can just say I think there is nothing that Joe Ingles would hate more than if I moved to Milwaukee to try and talk to him every single day. I think he would be so pissed off if I did that. I think he's going to be probably pissed if I even come and say hello to him tonight and ask him if we can chat. So,
well, yeah, why is this? Why is he so Why would he be so prickly about you, Kane? Lovable Kane Pittman. What did you ever do to Joe?
Well, I think particularly now, I have been trying to talk to him, and he's like, look, I'm in Australia. I'm on holidays. I'm doing rehab. I don't want to talk to anyone officially. And it's like, okay, well, that's fair enough. But for the most part, he just likes talking trash. So if I asked him, he would say some smart comment back, and then it would be all friendly. But as far as on the basketball court, it's interesting. You mentioned the dip in his 3-point shooting last year, and it was interesting because as I was watching him, I was wondering.
Is that how you're going to break the ice? Ask him why his 3-point shooting percentage went down last year. That I'm sure that will get him to open up.
Well, we spoke about it on our show back here about what it would mean for Joe Ingles and could he return to the game. And it was interesting when you think about, and a lot of teams went through this, but certainly for older players that were playing a major role like he was on the Utah Jazz, he also played for Australia in the Olympics. And when he plays in the Olympics, he has an even bigger role than he does with the Utah Jazz. and went straight into the season. And quite honestly, he just looked really tired at the start of last year. And I was wondering, does he have anything left in the tank, or is this just fatigue rolling on from the Olympics? And it wouldn't be a surprise did his 3-point shot drop, but he still was over 70% at the rim. He was still facilitating at a pretty high level. And defensively, as far as Utah go, I'm probably more optimistic that defensively it can translate to the Bucks, but just because of the absolute lack of any defense on the perimeter in Utah. We saw what happened in the postseason. I mean, it was just a turnstile to Rudy Gobert down there. As far as positionally, I went to Cleaning the Glass to check this out, because if you think about some of the guys that Utah had, and you mentioned the pick and roll game, going back a couple of years ago, the Joe Ingles, Derek Favors pick and roll was just about the unstoppable force in the NBA. But even last year, there was a 50-50 split between the 3 and the 4. He actually played 60% of his minutes in 2020-21 at the 4, and then the year before it was 65%. So over the last 3 years, it switched. When he first came into the league, he was playing mostly at the 3, and then he slipped mostly to the 4. So with the group that you mentioned with Drew, I even put Wes in there. And then you've got Drew, Wes, Chris, Joe Ingles, and Giannis. I mean, that we spoke a lot about the series with the Celtics, when as soon as you took away Chris Middleton, it's like, okay, we're one short and we don't have the size. If you have those 5 in a lineup together, you've got size across all the positions. You've got Giannis, who's just out of this world. And all guys are comfortable switching basically anywhere. So I think lineup versatility, no doubt it's a risk. You have to get to the point where he comes back. And just on the timing, I wouldn't expect that. I mean, there will be no rush with this. I mean, I don't. I mean, I would have to imagine that the Bucks are like, this is, we're going to ramp you up after the All-Star break. Not to say he might not return before then, but that's when the ramp up's going to happen. And we're going to hopefully have you ready to go for that reason in the postseason. But I think lineup versatility with the size, switchability, and not needing to do it all. And it felt like he had to do too much defensively, Utah, which is a big ask for a 35-year-old.
Yeah, and I think one other piece to this, I mean, what's the downside scenario? I mean, the downside scenario is you get to the trade deadline and, if he has a setback, or, you have another injury that creates a bigger need at another position, or you just see an opportunity to go and make a trade that you think just makes you better. You've got essentially, that $6.5 million expiring salary that you can put into trades and aggregate to try to bring back somebody else. So again, I mean, that's not why you give a guy a contract, to just not play for you and be in a dead weight salary. That it's a very expensive. I mean, I think we talked about this is on the margin. This is going to cost the Bucks from a tax perspective. Using the full MLE is like a $30 million increase in their total cost. So, again, hey, ownership, you're trying to win a championship. Like, you got to do this stuff on the margins. I don't want to say give them credit, but I also want to make sure, to anyone thinking that they were going to kind of, penny pinch and try to cut corners in the offseason. They essentially, they max Bobby Portis in terms of what they could pay him. They've used the full taxpayer mid-level. That's pretty much everything that you could have asked from them in terms of financial commitment. And so, again, kudos to the Bucks. They're going to have a big tax payment. You hope that we get a long postseason run to help pay the bills. And but that's what you have to do. I mean, this is, you don't have Giannis Antetokounmpo in his prime and then try to, save 5 million, 10 million, 20 million bucks in tax payments if it's going to hurt your chances of winning a championship. So yeah, I mean, again, like, who knows? There's a lot of uncertainty around it. But I think from upside, kind of take a big cut and see if it pans out perspective, it could be an awesome addition if he comes back and can be contributing by the time the playoffs roll around, or it could be a dud and he never plays next season, and maybe you trade him at the deadline or something. So any other first day free agency topics we haven't hit? We still have Jordan Warra, who's has a qualifying offer of $2 million. I don't know that there's a spot on the roster for him. As we said, I would say there's not a strong reason to think the Bucks are going to take 15 guys into the regular season, given that they don't have to. And on the one hand, the tax isn't calculated until, what you're based on. It's only calculated based on what your roster is at the end of the year. So you could take a Ray John Tucker into the regular season, and his deal doesn't guarantee until January 10th. So whatever, right? That you could avoid having to have that hit your tax bill. But like Luca Vildoza, his contract guarantees on opening night. So, there's not an urgency to make a decision, for instance, on Luca Vildoza right now. But if you take him into opening night, then, if it doesn't work out, then you're potentially eating a lot of money if you, for instance, had to waive him and you couldn't trade him. So, so we'll kind of see what's going on. I feel like Jordan Warra is probably not coming back, especially with Beauchamp, and not like Jordan was teed up to be a playoff guy anyway, but certainly bringing back also or bringing in Joe Ingles and bringing back Wes, those are all guys that are going to leave the wing kind of more and more crowded, especially knock on wood when Joe comes back. But it's possible, right? Certainly possible. They do have that one extra roster spot, but my guess is they'll figure out a way to make that a big man. And I think probably the other question, as we alluded to, is just, do they do some sort of trade where they involve George Hill and or Grayson Allen, right? That's probably the one other big thing to watch for this summer is just, again, do they do something with that last roster spot before the camp? I'm sure they'll bring in some camp bodies, and then is there a potential trade, right? So at least one thing we can keep our eye on here. I'm guessing we'll see. I'm guessing the Bucks seem to want to have a nice July 4th weekend based on everything that just happened. But who knows? Who knows if maybe we'll get a trade over the next few days to kind of rouse us from our slumber.
Yeah, it'll be interesting that, as you just alluded to, I guess the big man backup spot, if they wanted any insurance there, they weren't too fast last year. We'll see whether that's changed the planning. And then, just the backup point guard. Do they basically? I mean, because George Hill is an older man. Do they think that he's the backup point guard, or is this an investment in Jevon Carter? So we'll see what happens there. Just one last one on Joe Ingles as well, in terms of the good bloke locker room that we suggest that the Bucks have, and I think Chris Middleton described it as the no asshole policy. That is one area that Joe will absolutely fit in. People might not be aware, but the amount of work that he's done in the community in Utah and back in Australia, particularly around autism awareness. His son Jacob is autistic. Joe was really the main pusher behind getting sensory rooms at the Utah Jazz Arena, multiple arenas here in Melbourne as well. So he'll do a lot of probably good work in that space in Milwaukee as well. And overall, I would say probably an easy guy to get behind. So I think he'll be popular. And like I told Eric Name, don't set yourself up with a silly question, because you're going to hear about it.
Well, he's only an asshole to you when you ask dumb questions, Kane. So everybody else he's great with, and then you just walk into stuff, I guess. Before we go, I do have one note in case people are curious. If they do take 14 guys into the regular season, probably looking, again, based on the current salaries, including Grayson and George and all the guys that they signed today, looking at a tax bill of around $59 million. So not cheap. $233 million total for this roster. So, cost of doing business in the NBA.
I've got a different way of looking at this, because people will say, $60 million, but to me, Giannis is starting to get up. I don't know. I don't have his contract right in front of me. Maybe you do.
43 million, 42.5.
Yeah, he's worth 100 million. So the tax bill is essentially just keeping Giannis in Milwaukee. It's fine. That's the way I'm looking at it. This is what you do to have that man playing for this team. So I guess we'll see how the next couple of days panned out. This is lovely. It's only 8 p.m. Frank, you can get the hell out of the office. Enjoy a long weekend, and we'll see what happens over the weekend and see if there's anything noteworthy, and be back next week. By the way, are you doing anything with your days off?
So I have Friday off and Monday off. From my company gives us a long weekend. So, but my daughter has daycare on Friday. So, I don't know. I got to figure out what I want to do with my day. Normally on weekends I'm hanging out with my daughter. So, I don't know. What can I do? I need to go get. I was thinking about getting some new golf clubs. Actually.
Now that is a day off activity if I've ever heard it.
Yeah, that's a washed up dad on his day off type move.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll go get some golf clubs. That feels like a good off season thing to do, and be monitoring Twitter to see if anything interesting happens down the pike. We didn't even talk about Kevin Durant, we're the only podcast that NBA podcast that didn't, blather about Kevin Durant for 10 minutes. Man, Brooklyn, tough times in Brooklyn. No idea what's going to happen there. But my personal hope is Kevin Durant ends up far, far away in the Western Conference in Phoenix or someplace else. And if we have to go through Kevin Durant again, I would rather be it in the NBA Finals. But I mean, this is you mentioned it, the no assholes policy. Just this is why we just need to sometimes take a minute and just pause and appreciate the culture that
No drama.
Giannis, Chris, Drew, Bud, really kind of top to bottom this roster. I mean, we see it too with Marjon Beauchamp. I mean, I haven't been on the pod since draft night with you, Kane, but there's obviously a profile of the type of player and the type of person that this team goes after. And do they sometimes maybe miss out on guys that maybe have some character concerns but have basketball talent? Yeah, maybe sometimes they do. But it's just such a fun group to root for, and you just can't help but feel good about the group of guys they have. And man, I just really appreciate that we don't have to do emergency pods about, and again, I knock on wood here, but we don't have to deal with kind of the whims of the Kyrie Irvings of the world and trade demands of guys that feel like they're entitled to not have to play on a team if their best friend isn't there. Or, I mean, not even big markets apparently are can avert some of this stuff with what's happening in Brooklyn. But yeah, just thankful for having our very boring Milwaukee Bucks on a day like this.
It's a perfect way to end it. And I know there aren't too many Brooklyn Nets fans, but imagine being a Brooklyn Nets fan. Oh my goodness, what a roller coaster the last few years.
This would be more enjoyable if, like, that's the thing, right? Like, I know that there are Brooklyn Nets fans out there. I'm sure there's some that are like bandwagon who
just
like
don't know any. Yeah,
screw them. But like, they're not vocal to me, so I don't really like. There's like the fanboys of the players, right? But
yeah,
like real like people who are like Nets fans, like I don't really know them, so I can't, like with Philly or Miami or Boston, like I can take pleasure in those teams going through crises and losing. But with Brooklyn, it's just like, I don't know. So I guess we'll see.
Well, I'm sure Miami will offer up Tyler Hero, Duncan Robertson, and a second-round pick for Durant. So we'll see how that goes out there. But we'll leave it there. Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. I'm sure you will about all these signings, the guys coming back, and the addition of Joe Ingles. And we'll be back next week. Check out the Locked On NBA podcast after this, and then you'll get a really good wrap of everything else that we didn't get time to go through. We've gone 45 minutes purely on the Bucks today. So check out the Locked On NBA podcast after this. We'll catch you guys next week.